everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the buffet, usually with Tony Yarber. I am Angela Grayson. I'll be sitting in for Mr. Tony Yarber in his stead. So the first thing we want to do is thank everybody for joining us, and y'all know what to do. Go ahead and make sure you are liking this page, this broadcast, and share it. Make sure some folks on your timeline get some real good information today. Get some Black Girl Magic on your page today. So make sure you go ahead and share this out for us today. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors, all those good folks who make this show happen. One of which who is Sherry Tate with the amazing book Meet Mason. Wherever you are buying your books from, you can find Meet Mason by Sherry Tate. If you are have children in Jackson Public Schools, or if you have children that attend daycare centers or anything like that around the city of Jackson, you've likely ran into Sherry Tate and Meet Mason here lately. Now, for the good stuff, we are, 2 or 3 days outside of Election Day. So, of course, that's what we want to talk about today. I'm Angela Grayson, and today we have the amazing Teresa Kennedy joining me. I'm so glad that she would be here today. We're going to kind of wrap up what happened across the nation, across Hinds County with elections. And then we want to hear from you what you think is going to happen over the next couple of weeks as we go into runoff elections. So thank you so much for joining me, Teresa.
Thank you for having me, Angela. Glad to be here. First time here. Right.
So look, typically it's Yarber here and then me and whoever's the guest. I think I like this seat a little bit. So okay. I'm going to have to text them and say, hey, I think I want to negotiate where I sit when I come on from now on. But look, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. I don't want to prolong it. I want to give Teresa the opportunity to start the conversation, what you are thinking about or what you're feeling, where's your head coming out of some really, really big races across the nation for midterm elections.
Yes, so midterm elections. We're still trying to figure out some elections. So the Senate, U.S. Senate seats are being decided. Obviously, everybody has their eyes on Georgia with Randolph, Warnock, and that other guy.
And that other guy, we won't even say his name. We're just tired of his name being said.
We're tired of his name. We're tired of him. You know, if he just decides to just stay at home and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, we will be very happy.
You know, that brings up a good point, though, because I don't think that there's anything that Herschel Walker himself could do that could stop the establishment that wants a Herschel Walker in, and that's why we have to be vigilant as the folks who cannot afford for Herschel Walker to win. We got to make sure we're putting our efforts on the ground in Georgia. I think even last night, conversation about Georgia came up on another broadcast. I was watching some amazing women over at Women for Progress were talking about what needs to happen in the wake of them going into this runoff, and a lot of people say you got to send some money over to Georgia. You got to send some money over to Georgia. One of the things that's going to be important is to not just send money to candidates, but we got to send money to organizations that have people on the ground that are doing the work. Election season and out of election seasons, you got New Georgia Project over in Georgia. You got the Black Southern Women Collaborative.
You got the Black Voters Matter.
Black Voters Matters. All these groups on the ground, and I think that's where they need the money because that's who's doing the work.
Absolutely. You know, oftentimes people do forget about orgs like that and the impact that they can have because, like you said, they are boots on the ground. And, you know, a lot of money was poured into Georgia, still being poured into Georgia. And if you're going to support anyone, we would strongly encourage those people who are doing the heavy lifting. The candidates, they're going to get it because there are other people that are going to support them. Usually the establishments are supporting them, especially when you're talking on that level. When you're talking federal level, you're talking U.S. Congress, you're talking U.S. House. Mm-hmm. So those positions typically get the support that they need in other states. Now here in Mississippi, not so much, and it definitely doesn't come that fast.
Look, so I knew that once we started talking about Georgia, then the conversations about what needs to happen across the country comes up, because one of the things that we're seeing happen in Georgia is all this talk about money, right? Mm-hmm. And so we do see a lot of federal money, and when I say federal money, I mean the Democratic Party at the national level, and that party pumping money into Georgia to save it versus the Democratic Party going in on the front end and helping prevent a Herschel Walker from being able to get the type of lead that he had. The other thing is they have some. It brings into question what's the Democratic Party doing at the national level that is lacking. So we got to change the way we talk about these races. We got to change the way we pump money into these races early on, and then we got to change the way we trickle money down to states like Mississippi. If you get money into smaller races, you can help build up the party in a way that says we have some momentum, and then Georgia is easier to win.
Absolutely. And just a few years ago, we're not too far removed, Georgia was not a state that most people thought
That's
that
right.
couldn't turn blue or purple. And so you're right. You're absolutely correct about the sooner the money comes in, the more organized people can be, the more likely they can be influencing folks, educating people long before the elections. And we know here in Mississippi, we have an election every single year. So there is action happening. There are people moving. There are people who are strategic, and intentional about their efforts in Mississippi. And so we have got to do more. And you're right, Angela, when you talk about the national level, especially the Democratic Party, there's been a lot of talk about what does the party look like in the next 5-10 years, and what can we do to ensure that the party continues to grow and continues to be impactful.
Well, even though you didn't ask, I'm going to tell you. The Democratic Party here in Mississippi can lean into this thing that's happening across this state. We can elect black women. We can put money behind black women. We can give black women the support that they need, because what we do know is that black women are leading cities who have demographics like Jackson.
They are.
All across the nation. That's not some unicorn that's happening in Atlanta, New Orleans. Those things are because black women have the best interest of the cities that they govern, right? Mm-hmm. And that's no different from Mississippi. If we lean into black women who typically and traditionally vote in their best interest. In fact, there's so much data that says that black women is the highest growing demographic of citizen age voting population, which means we're voting power. Now, what we need is representation that matches that. That's Absolutely. What we preach over at the Black Women Vote Coalition. We're one of those groups we just talked about being on the ground, connecting what's happening in our homes to politics and beyond. That's why we preach beyond the ballot. So, Teresa, talk to us a little bit about some other places and some other things that are happening around the nation as it relates to midterms.
Well, they're not only looking at Georgia, they're also looking at Maryland.
Yes.
That was a big, huge success for the Democratic Party.
That was.
They won the governor's seat. They won the lieutenant governor's seat. They also, I believe, the Secretary of State seat, which is very big. Maryland also elected their first woman governor.
No, the first black man governor.
Black man. That's Massachusetts. Then.
Massachusetts put all those women in those positions. Now, while all those positions in Massachusetts was not black women, they were women. And while I know that some people will argue, not very smart people, some people will argue that the issues that face America are gender neutral, right? They're across the board. But what I will say is that when you have disparities in how women are treated versus men, then you got to do politics from that lens, because that's the only way you begin to fix those issues.
Oh, yeah.
So where you have a huge disparity in the way women are paid from our male counterparts,
healthcare.
Listen, then you got to start having representation that zones in and says, hey, what's going on with women? And because there was such an egregious attack on women this year as far as repealing Roe versus Wade, I feel like that put some fuel behind women to go out and make it happen.
Well, not all women.
Come on.
Let's be clear about that.
Let's be clear.
Yes. It does amaze me how a woman can really vote against her interests. And I heard someone say this, and she said that white women vote party. They don't vote interests. They don't vote things that impact them
their best
necessarily.
interests, right?
Yes, they vote party lines. And as a result of that, that's why we saw something like Roe versus Wade get repealed, and Dodd versus Mississippi being the one that went all the way to Supreme Court, led by our state's attorney, Lynn Fitch, a white woman, who really was pushing for it, and really leading that effort. And I'll never understand it, but like you said, we got to do a better job of electing those persons who have our best interests at heart. And I think the only way we do that is we elect people who align with what we believe and not just talk it, but they actually walk it.
That's right. Now, Teresa, I know you run a number of campaigns across the county, across the state, actually. What would you believe are those things we need to be doing for women early on? Because we talked about that being the determining factor in a lot of these races that happen across the nation, is them being able to have the support that they needed early on. So what specifically would you say that we need to be doing for, number one, women candidates, number two, black women candidates, and just Democratic candidates early on? What are those things we need to be doing?
Well, one, educating them. We know that when women are asked, they're more likely to run. But before the ask, though, we have to educate women on that. And, most women don't think that they're able to lead, yet they lead the households. We know here in Mississippi, most households are led by women.
That's right.
But so understanding that, you don't need a fancy title. You don't need all these degrees. I look at the young man down, and I know we're talking about women, but I look at the young man
in
who's
Florida.
In Florida.
Come on,
Generation
now.
Z.
Listen.
25 years old.
Turned it out.
Yes, and not only that, I mean, he took out an incumbent, a Republican incumbent, and he just barely made the age limit or a minimum age requirement to run for U.S. Congress.
Right.
So,
I want to put a pin right there before we go on. That's why it's so important for us to be organizing. Anytime I can say why it's so important to support women-led organizations that are doing on-the-ground advocacy, making sure that we connect people in their everyday lives to the Democratic, not the Democratic Party, but to the democratic process, and to become more civically involved. Because what happened was that guy was asked by the community to run because he had been on the ground helping them organize around issues, not even around people or a platform, around issues that impacted them.
Yeah. Since he was 15 years old.
Right.
And he ran with that all the way up into now Congress. That's amazing.
And won, beat an incumbent. That is amazing. And one of the things that when we talk about these races, one thing that I like to do is dispel this magic that people put around him, right? Mm-hmm. So this mystical thing, this once in a lifetime, that's not what happened.
Mm-mm. No. And I think that
it's methods that can be scaled.
Absolutely.
We can do that here.
It can be repeated.
Right.
Well, success has a track record. And so once it's been proven it can happen, it can be done again. Same thing I feel about with Georgia. With Stacey Abrams' nonprofit registering all those thousands, almost 1 million people to vote, it really, that success can not only be tracked, but can be duplicated. And so you asked me about
what we need to do. Yeah, yes. What we need to do to
educate
support
women,
us.
ask women.
Yeah.
And then support women. And let me be clear about when I say that, because I'm a part of women-led organizations that are heavily, most of the membership are women. We got to be careful, even in supporting women, saying that we support women, there still need to be, and this is not to down anyone when I say this, and I don't want it to be mistaken, but everybody that runs isn't meant to serve in that capacity. Mm-hmm. I think far too often we see, especially here in Mississippi, everybody wants to be the mayor, right? Everybody wants to be the sheriff.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it makes no sense that we have 10, 12, 13 people running for an office, and if only there had been obviously a conversation and we put forth the best person, even the best woman to run, it really greaters the chance of that person succeeding and coming out on top. So when I say support other women, I mean, be honest and be real about where you stand and where you, and then while I know you should be you should have that confidence, right? You should believe that you can be the one to move this along. That that also requires you having some real friends too. That can, so surrounding yourself around good people is impactful. And while it may not always make you change your mind, I think you do take into account when people that you trust and believe that that believe and want the best for you. You know that even if they say, you know what, this may not be your time right now, not to say it's denying it, but just maybe a delay in it. And
right.
So,
I hear you. And one of the things that make that conversation comes up a lot in relation to when black women are getting ready to run, whereas a man just has to say, I want to run, and then it's fair game, right? We don't care how many other men. But one of the things
we care.
We do. It sometimes it is, but what I'm saying is he's not met with the type of
I agree.
Walls or blockage that a woman, because it's like, well, it's already a woman running, Yeah. But what I think we need to do is what our counterparts seem to have mastered is we got to start IDing people early on. We know when elections roll around. We know what you've been doing in the community. We know your track records in the corporations you work for. We know all these things about who you are. We got to start IDing people early on, pouring our money into them, pouring our mentorships into them, aligning them, doing like you mentioned once before, making sure we just make an introduction between this woman and the women that she needs to know, the men she needs to know. What I'm saying is we got to start grooming people for these seats so that when it's time for them to run, we're not asking questions like who's going to run, who's most qualified. We know. It's almost like we expect this woman to run and we expect her to win.
Okay, and that's also real quick before we go. That's where I talk about the education component.
Absolutely. Yeah, meet us right back here on the other side of our break. We're going to talk about local politics and the breakdown of the judicial races from the 8th.
Let's read and learn together. Meet Mason. Written by Sherry Tate. Illustrated by...
Do you have something to say? Do you want your voice heard? Join the We Believe Global lineup. Be the star of your own show. For more info, call 800-492-5186, option number 1, or visit online at webelieve.global.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, Keepers of the Knowledge for People Who Speak the Truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Thank you so much for joining us back here at the buffet with Tony Yarber. Obviously, there's no Tony Yarber today. We're sitting in his stead with the amazing Teresa Kennedy, Angela Grayson. We are going to kind of shift while we'll still talk about politics. I did, Teresa, want to hear your thoughts on the judicial races that happen across Hinds County. Before we jump head first into Hinds County, what do you think about having to really work to pull off election night, Benny Thompson? There's some work we got to do as a party and as a people to make sure folks like Benny Thompson don't get in a bind where we're on pins and needles for his seat, because we need that seat.
Absolutely. I was checking out the numbers in comparison to his proteges, or his colleagues, I should say, the other people in other districts. And while they all received 70%, Benny barely got, he didn't even make it 60. It was like 58, 59%. And I don't know if that's been the case over the years. I don't know that's been.
He normally just walks away with it.
Yes.
Right. And I know that on election night, early on in the night, there were even times in the race where it was 49-51. And that's unheard of when we talk about Benny in that seat in Congressional District 2. So what I think, the first thing we got to acknowledge is that the Republican Party are doing the things at the levels that they need to gain control of
every
right. So when
seat.
we see those redistricting, we got to be involved. We got to lift our voices up. We got to organize toward that, because there's some places around the redistricting and some opportunities had Flowers did it just a little more in some of those spots.
Absolutely.
He absolutely could have been a real contender for Benny Thompson. We could have seen for the first time in a long time Benny go to a runoff.
Yeah, and that was an interesting, and like you said, it definitely opened our eyes to what could be. Because I also think about this. We also know that Benny Thompson's been in office he's going to his 30th year. And so his name ID rings heavy, throughout his district and throughout the state, but mainly
and across the nation, right?
Oh, absolutely, especially involving this insurrection and homeland security. But my point I was going to make was a person with high name ID like that, and Flowers, while he didn't win the election, he won the building of his name ID.
And he won in some key places that they're going to now be energized and feel like, oh, we can do this next time. And we better believe they're looking at the numbers. They're getting down into the the margins of victory to see where they need to mobilize and get their votes. And we can definitely, mark my words, see voter suppression going to happen in those areas. They're going to purge those voter files so that next time that they can really have what they need to get that seat.
And not only that, Angela, one also thing that came to mind was when you talk about grooming. I don't know what the grooming process is like, and we know he won't always be in this seat. But
we're getting over into that territory that we don't like to talk about, right? Because when we start talking about who's going to come behind, we got to talk about it.
and because it's too critical. We really at a point where the conversation, and I know the conversation probably is being had. I'm not privy to that. I understand that. Probably never will.
But we also still know that in a lot of places to have that conversation is being deemed disrespectful, and we got to get away from that, because we got some young folks, some amazing folks, some new thought leaders, some bold new leadership, and we got to make way for them. And we don't have to behold them to certain people or things. We got to give them the room to come through and lead us in the direction that they see the future, and not hold them hostage to how we want them to lead.
Absolutely. And again, it was scary looking at the numbers, and like you said, they're gonna organize.
Oh yeah,
they're gonna do all the things they can, and we gonna sit on our hands and think that it's gonna be okay. It just happened this one time, but 2 years from now, it is scary to know what could happen. And without the grooming of someone to come behind, and I'm not saying, like I said, I don't think it's not happening, but I am concerned because Benny Thompson name, and everybody know who Brian Flowers is now. You know what I'm saying? Throughout D2. And so the guy has built up a name ID. He didn't get it this time, but you best to believe people who don't really know what that office entails will probably give him a look, because they don't realize how important
here's what's going to happen. He couldn't pull it off because most people know not to run against Benny Thompson, right? But when we see someone like a Brian Flowers, unqualified, doesn't have the money, doesn't have the team, doesn't have the manpower, almost do what he did with Benny Thompson, then you send a clear message to the GOP that, hey, we need to get down there. We can put somebody who does have the money, who has a little experience, and we can win that. And that's a seat we cannot afford to lose.
Cannot. You hear me? And it's not just cannot lose because of Mississippi. We can't lose because of the power and the seniority he has in DC.
Right. And so he's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee. He's leading the charge on making sure folks are held accountable for January the 6th. And then just the other places that he has the influence and can send those dollars back to Jackson. We know he was instrumental in making sure that the governor and our state leaders are held responsible for what did not happen in Jackson as it relates to the water issues
and what will happen,
right?
Holding them accountable. So we definitely have to have, like you said, some hard conversations. We're gonna have to be real about where we are in terms of what's to come down a pipeline, and
Hey, so. Malcolm Johnson says two of his favorite people now. Malcolm, we want to make sure that we see you on your platforms, letting people know what to elect black women. Malcolm told me the other day he wanted one of these elect black women shirts. Look, I don't know if you can see the shirt, Malcolm, but I want you to know we got you a shirt, and I want to see you on all your platforms in your elect black women shirt.
Yes.
So, Teresa, now.
Yeah, that brings us to
right.
Hines
So
County.
Break down for us what happened across the judicial races. We had some black women pulled it off.
Absolutely. As you know, there were two black women who retired.
That's right.
Or retiring the end of this year in their judicial seats. Yeah, judicial seats. Anyway, one of them was obviously Judge Tommy Green retiring. And that seat was heavily contested by several people. And then the runoff is Deborah Gibbs and
Wendy Wilson-White.
That's right, Wendy Wilson-White. And then also,
look, before we even move from that, two amazing black women, right? So
amazing.
So we have a hard pick. I do think that Deborah Gibbs brings a special something to that seat. Now, we, of course, are not going to endorse people across these platforms. You guys know exactly who we are endorsing in these races and other places. But I think they both ran an amazing race. And Wendy Wilson-White, to be a newcomer to politics in Hines County, came out the bag.
She did.
Listen.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. Very impressive. Very passionate about the seat that she's running for. Very informed about the seat that she's running for. I think her platform is redefining justice.
Oh, and you actually remembered it.
Listen.
Well, I went to talk to the voters on the street to see if they remember. But, that does say a lot to... when you're building your name ID, it's like you said, someone who had never run before for a seat like this, a county seat, you want people to remember you. And so there does have to be certain things that you do, certain things that you say, certain things that you always consistently present and redefining justice. If I had to guess it, I probably would have got it like the third time. But it's interesting you remembered that though.
Yeah, but I think you make an interesting point because I know her opponent, Representative Deborah Gibbs, she did bring that into the race. Not only the name ID, but the fact that she had been on the ground for several years now, even before becoming representative, working in communities. And that's what I want to lift up. I think that's the most important part. That piece to lift up is here we have two very qualified black women, overqualified black women for this race. So we have now to just have the task for voters in Hines County is to dig deeper now.
Yep.
Dig a little deeper, go past name ID, go past
slogans.
That's right, and really dig down and see which candidate is proposing things, standing up for things, advocating for things that matter the most to you in your home.
Absolutely. And I think that's the approach you have to take with any office, to be honest. But in particularly this one, because we're talking about judicial races, absolutely, they're going to have to dig a little deeper because on the surface, they look almost the same. Like you said, they're both overqualified for the position. I think they both can do a great job at in the role of Chancery Court Circuit Court judge. And
now, one thing that was interesting to me is Representative Gibbs moving from the legislative arm now to judicial, being in that role that she's coming out of, writing laws that directly impact how judges are able to govern. I think that gives her a unique perspective, right? But then we have Wendy Wilson-White, who's been practicing for a number of years, has that courtroom experience. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. And we won't have long before we see how it plays out. November 29th is a runoff election date. And following the holiday, it's also the end of the month. Most elections are at the beginning of the month. So, and within this 1 month, we'll have two elections that have happened. And we just got to make sure people turn back out to the polls.
That's right. It's so important for us to get back to the polls. Number one, we want to make sure that the people who are elected are a fair representation of the people who they'll serve.
The electorate.
So when we have such a small, and I think voter turnout from Tuesday is right now at about 29%. Now that's
horrible.
Yeah. We have 167,000 people who are registered to vote. We had 50,000 people who voted in this election across the county. We got to do better. We just got to do better. And I always say, the voters need to get out and vote, but then you got organizations like the Black Women Vote Coalition, Mississippi Votes, One Voice, all of us have the burden of making sure that we don't let up, because some of that burden falls on our shoulders. We got to make sure we're educating people, make sure we're energizing people and giving them those incentives by way of advocacy to get out there and get the vote out. I don't want us to run out of time before we get to Adrienne Wooten and David Lindsay, another Black woman who came and did what she had to do.
She did do that. Adrienne Wooten obviously didn't comment. This is her going into her second term now. Mm-hmm. She blew it out the water. And I think, Adrienne gets a bad rep sometimes because she don't obviously side or rule in favor of like everyone else thinks she should or ought to. And I don't think everybody will always agree with every ruling that every judge has done.
Well,
but at the end of the day, she's very adamant about talking about the law having come from the state house.
That's right, because she helped write the law. She understands the law.
Absolutely. And so, it does give her a unique perspective, like you said before, to, like you said, apply the law, interpret the law and apply the law. But yes, Adrienne did a great job. We know that sister cannot be outworked. She
was across the county. Do you hear me?
She was everywhere we were.
She was. You know what's interesting? Y'all know I love the numbers, and if you don't know, that's my favorite part about campaigns. The day after. Yeah, we're laughing because I've picked up a really bad habit that I picked up actually from the host of this show of saying what the data says, and so that is one of my favorite things to do is the days after an election is really get out in those numbers. And what I found interesting is David Lindsay's overwhelming win over in Northeast Jackson, 32, 33, those different precincts, and I think that goes back to the only place we saw him work. Nope. And so Hinds County, you got to pay attention.
No, I know you know, Angela. What precincts are 32 and 33?
Oh, okay. So that's going to be McWillie. He did not win McLeod Elementary, but he did win, I think, over at Boyd. The fire station that's up in Northeast Jackson, because you asked, I cannot call them out now. They just escaped me right now. But it's going to be that chunk of precincts that are 30 through about 36, with the exception of 31, which Johnson Elementary that was in our district, well, in Chancery Court District 5-3. So when I say to voters, you want to look at that, you want to look at where people are getting high concentrated votes who did not win races, because that lets you know where their interests are, and that also lets you dig deeper and ask questions about why would this candidate fare well here and not across the county. We got to make sure when we get representation, that representation has the best interest of all of us.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important to get in there and get in those numbers and kind of understand them, feel your way through what the numbers are saying to us. We had a number of judges who retained their seats because their races were unopposed. So huge congratulations to Judge Hicks, Judge Kidd, help me name them out, Judge
McDaniels, Crystal Rice Martin, Faye Peterson, down in Raymond Terry. Oh gosh,
we gotta watch the races, yeah. But they, in our defense, they were uncontested. So we had Chancery Court races, right? So Judge Denise Owens, who has served the Hinds County for several decades now, is retiring. Honorable woman. Her race was open. We had 3 newcomers to the scene. Attorney Demetrius Hodges, who's running on security, safety, and stability for our families and children. We had Mr. Damon Stevenson, who is not only an attorney, but municipal judge down in Byram. And then, of course, we have Gayla Carpenter Sanders, who is an attorney. Going off into the runoff from that race is Attorney Demetrius Hodges and Gayla Carpenter Sanders.
Well, I will
break
add,
it down for us.
Yes, I do need to say this. Demetrius Hodges was the front runner.
She was. Amazing race she ran.
An amazing race. Again, hard work cannot be outdone.
That's right.
I told down at the courthouse election night, I told Judge Wooden, I said, I guess she took a page out your book, your blueprint. Because we know Adrienne Wooden worked
She's
her
a
butt
door
off.
knocker. That's
yes,
right.
she is. And kudos to Demetrius Hodges.
I hear she walked her district 3 entire times. That's unheard of in any race because you have to divide your time. Time is money in a judicial race. Time is money on any campaign trail, right?
Absolutely.
So anytime you have a candidate prioritize getting at the door, meeting folks the way that Attorney Hodges did, that's gold.
Absolutely. And that's to be commended. You're right,
is.
Angela, because I've never heard of someone walking the entire district
3 times.
Not one time, not twice, but 3 times.
Look.
She has really, this is something that she's come to realize that she's been preparing for quite some time.
That's right.
This didn't just happen. This isn't something that she thought about last year. She knew that this opportunity would one day come and that she was going to give it all she got. And that's what she's doing.
And I think when we say those type of things, I think it's important to bring some context into that conversation, right? And how do we know that she's been preparing for this role her entire career? Well, we can look at the type of work she's done. I believe she started out in workman compensation, making sure families had the security that they needed, that they would eat even if injury occurred with the parent or the breadwinner, right?
That's correct.
And then going on to practice in family law, making sure women who had been victims of domestic violence were able to get out of those situations, if it be divorce or whatever. And then as her unique life experience being...
Well, let's wait. Even as a family attorney, though, she represented men, too.
That's true.
I've heard her speak to that. She represented men who wanted their parental rights established, maybe found themselves in a situation where either the mother was keeping the child from them or through divorce wanted to establish what all they could do in by law. And so she really cares about her clients, which fast forward to, or at least integrates itself into her life experiences.
That's right.
Often, what a lot of people don't realize is Chancery Court is a court of equity. It's a court where families, I've heard her say, land, it deals with families, land, and what other thing?
So that brings us into a very important point, and when we talk about Chancery Court and how it brings us back to what's going across the nation, right? Mm-hmm. So in Chancery Court, that's the judge that's going to hear any challenges to the Mississippi State Constitution, and that's why Chancery Court judges in Hinds County had a huge opportunity to rule in the Dobbs case, right? That ultimately helped repeal Roe versus Wade. You got to have people in that seat that understand what people need, what the mass, what the constituency-based beliefs are what we feel is right. Not only that, being able to marry that experience, that lived experience with the law.
Absolutely. And Hodges has that. Now, while I would say her life hasn't been a crystal stair, I think she has come to realize, you know, you look back over your life, how some things just really look like they turned out for your bad, but they end up being for your good.
You better come on with the word here, Teresa.
But nevertheless, those experiences that she had as a child growing up, which led to her being adopted or taken into a foster care.
Foster child, right?
Yep, being a foster child and taken into foster care, and being raised by her 7th grade reading teacher and her husband, the Crockett's, really helped, really shaped, and really prepared her for today.
Yeah, because she's a foster mom. And I heard this several times when we were watching the debates, that Chancery Court does not determine or does not rule in foster care cases. However, we know that something happens in the home for a child to end up or need fostering. So that's what Chancery Court deals with when there are issues in homes that might lead to a child being pulled outside of the home. Those are the things that Chancery Court chancellor an opportunity to intervene, so they either make sure that a child will enter into the foster care system, or they can do the things necessary so children don't end up in the foster care system. And I think she's unique in the fact that she knows that intimately as an attorney, but more intimately as a foster child herself, and then taking on the amazing burden or opportunity of fostering as a foster mom.
Absolutely. And she also understands that safety, security, and stability are ever so important.
That's right.
To a child. Having, again, lived that experience. And also, another thing I really, really like, because I don't want to just talk about her life experiences as if that's the only reason that quantifies her.
That's another thing that we find Black women having to do far more often than our male counterparts is overstate how qualified we are for a position, right? Demetrius Hodges has been practicing law for how long now? Over a decade?
Yes, almost 12 years. And
courtroom experience?
Courtroom experience.
Come on here.
You know, you talked about workman's comp, her handling workman's comp cases when she worked for Morgan & Morgan. Obviously, that's when she first came out of law school, and, you know, she had to win cases.
That's right.
You know, I have to give it to her. One of the things, she studies really hard. She makes sure she knows what she's talking about. And that's important to any case. I'd imagine any attorney would want a judge that knows how a courtroom is to be ran and how from point A to point B, they know what to expect and how important that is, and not to be left guessing what it would be like going before the judge. Another thing I'll mention too, when she was a family trial attorney, she often went to court, and I think we said this already, but I want to emphasize it, how important that courtroom trial experience is because those cases oftentimes end up in front of, a trial experience. And she understands also how these people have real issues, right?
That's right.
And they want real resolutions.
For their real issues, right?
And they want them in a timely manner. When a child has found themselves in a situation, or even a family that may have lost a loved one and needing to get some things done as it relates to a probate, and it relates to land and property, they don't want that to linger on for weeks or months at a time. Everybody wants to be heard, and she understands why and being heard is important. And so I do think that she's the best woman for the job.
I would have to agree, and I would have to agree because I think she won me over across this campaign trail. Number one, she's relatable, but nothing beats hard work. I have to go back to the fact that she put the work in. We didn't see her be a candidate that just money on the ground, day of election, couple days of the election. A lot of people who were at those polls, they showed up because she asked them to show up.
Oh, yeah.
She personally asked them to show up.
And I heard several women say that on election day, as we were moving around from precinct to precinct. I heard people say, she told me when she came to my door.
That's right.
She told me that I could help on election day. So here I am. You know, and that goes back to that hard work. It goes back to knowing your constituents. You know, it's so important that we elect people that you don't just see during election time.
That's right.
Another thing that won me over, and I've been knowing her for years. We met at church. She used to try to sit on my pew, but nevertheless, one of the other things that won me over with her was her involvement in the community. While she serves on boards, and she's particular about even the boards she serves on. One of them is the Boys and Girls Club. That was something that she participated in when she was a child, and so she saw the impact there. When she attended Piney Woods schools, she used to, during college, when she would come home in the summer, she would go and volunteer down at Piney Woods as a summer counselor. And so she's real intentional about where she puts her time and energy.
Yeah, I can really respect that.
Yeah.
So,
I think I could go on and on about
listen,
her.
I could.
I think y'all get the point.
That race, though, again, when we get down in those numbers, that race was very tight. However, Demetrius overwhelmingly won precincts. And so I think that speaks to, again, just the effort she made at the door. But I think it's going to be interesting on the 29th. It's going to be so important, no matter who you're voting for, is get out there and vote, because we are choosing judges who have direct impact on your everyday life.
That's true.
So, Teresa, any final thoughts?
Well, I do want to encourage everyone to exercise your right to vote. We can't stress that enough. I won't go like my mother and daddy would probably say somebody died. And it's true. Somebody really did die. A lot of people died for our right to vote. But just look at the current climate that we're in. We know that if Roe v. Wade wasn't just about this one thing. They knew this was something that meant a lot to a lot of people. And there's been efforts over decades to overturn Roe v. Wade. And now they're coming after the other ones. They're coming after affirmative action. They're coming after they're
pretty good at the Voting Rights Act.
Absolutely. So I want you to exercise your right to vote, because it really does matter. Your vote really does count. She talked about Hodges, and we looked at the numbers in terms of the precincts that she won, and even the ones she didn't win. We looked at the numbers. It was a very tight race.
It was.
Every vote mattered. Every vote mattered. Everyone counted. And so I want you all to really, really keep that in mind. Right now, take out your phone. If you are like me, you have to get a calendar reminder to be on time and know where to be half of your life. That's me. I do put it in your phone right now. November 29th, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Even give yourself a time.
That's right.
To be at the poll. If that day it's a Tuesday, if Tuesdays you normally work till 6 o'clock, then make a reminder at 5:45. Let your boss know you need to leave at 5:30 or 5:45 so you can get to that poll and go vote.
Right.
Go vote.
So thank y'all for joining us here on the buffet with Tony Yarber. This is Angela Grayson sitting in for Tony Yarber with the amazing Teresa Kennedy. Thank y'all for joining us. Make sure, if you have not already picked up your copy of Meet Mason by Pastor Sherry Tate, that you do so. Join us back next Friday at 3 as we keep talking about the things that matter to us right here in Jackson and Hinds County. Thank you.